So, welcome to the sessions 10 Financial Crimes to Investigate. And my name is Bopha. I'm a moderator for this session. I'm a journalist and also a professor. And I am from Cambodia. So I'll let we should start because we are late. So I let Mr. Santanu, a journalist from India, to start with his career and then his work and more.
Thank you, Bopha. Pleased to be here. My name is Shantanu Guha. I have spent almost 3 decades in journalism, and I currently work for a European wire agency called the Central European News. It's a Vienna-based wire agency. I represent them in India. I've always maintained that journalists ideally should be very low profile because that's the best way to do their work. And I've always tried meticulously to maintain that. If there were some high points in my 30-year-old career, was one that I scooped one of India's biggest scandal, the coal scam, where coal mines were auctioned by the government to all kind of people who had no background in mining. This was also followed by 2 or 3 interesting investigations I did, and one of them was on diamonds. I'm sure you are all aware that how India and China now are dominating the world diamond trade, virtually taking over the West. And as a result of this, despite the Kimberley process in place, of large quantity of what you call the blood diamonds continue to filter into India. There was another investigation I did which was on an airport scam where a huge piece of land in Delhi's airport was handed over to a promoter by a controversial minister. I have faced lawsuits and all, which is I personally believe one should again not talk about it. Those are parts and parcel of a journalist's life. In investigation, what sometimes bothers me, it really doesn't disturb me, but sometimes it bothers me, is in India, which is interestingly one of the world's biggest zone for growth in newspapers and news channels. You'll be surprised to know we have more than 400 news channels and more than 1,000 newspapers in India. And there is a waiting list of about another 500 news channels waiting to join the line. I really don't know from where they get the money. I wish I had some of that money. But somewhere in this huge rush, the journalist faces the huge pressure of what we call is the breaking news. Everyone wants to break a story on television, and as a result, the journalists get pressurized. So somewhere down the line, I think investigations in India, except a handful, I increasingly see never going to the logical end, and that is something that disturbs me. Cricket, which is one of India's passion as a sport, is riddled with scandals, but somewhere again, investigations into cricket doesn't lead to its logical conclusion. The huge Panama Papers investigations that eventually reached the Indian shores, and we had a great discussion yesterday. May I humbly remind all of you that somewhere down the line, the Indian part of investigation has just hit a wall. Nothing has happened. Everyone has denied it, and beyond that, I do not know what exactly will happen. That should not take away the credit for people who have done that great investigations. But I believe the way the Indian media is increasingly being controlled, where the owner, which is primarily a corporate entity, dominates the terra firma, it gives all of us a problem that we do not find the right platform to put our stories out. So we have to do multiple things. We have to seek multiple avenues. Even try and create our own websites or spaces on the social media to try and do this. I won't take much more time. I'll just conclude by saying conferences like this are very useful because it at least gives me a great platform to network with journalists who also face similar pressures. I don't think journalists die in India while investigating. Some have died, but we are not into that grave zone. But what we are fearing is the lack of output. We are not getting great opportunities to do great investigations. We are getting limited opportunities to do investigations. And that is something that often bothers me. Still, there are great journalists in India who continue to do their great work, but their numbers have shrunk. And that's something I wish I could control. Thank you. Thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Santanu. And so I would like Mr. Poradu from Organized Crime, Corruption and Corruption Reporting Project to introduce himself and let the audience know that what he's doing.
It's not working? Yeah, well, it works now. Thank you. Wonderful. So I work with a network of journalists, and we operate all across Eastern Europe. But now we started working, in countries like Colombia, and in the past years we covered a lot of financial crime that is global. And at OCCRP, what we believe in is, that we need to stop criminals from doing business as usual. So that's our drive when we investigate financial crime. We believe that financial crime and the follow the money process should be part of every investigative, article, because it's always about the money in the end. Like in about 2010, what we started seeing was that we were investigating the same thing over and over again. We would investigate all sorts of fraud, cases all across Eastern Europe, from politicians getting bribes, in the millions of dollars, sometimes even more, to, lots of other crimes such as drug trafficking or human trafficking. And there was always the same component there. The financial crime was always there and was almost always conducted via the same elements of the crime. And these for us were, the banks, the offshore companies, the agents who would establish these offshore companies and such. So in about 2010, we set to do this investigative project that we called Offshore Crime Inc., Incorporated, where we actually looked at criminal infrastructure, at the infrastructure allowing criminals to launder their money. It was then when we realized, that there's a TOR-like system. For those of you who are not familiar with TOR, TOR is a tool that can be used, that you can use on the internet, to hide your presence. So a TOR-like network was also developed by criminals in the financial world. So we saw that banks in Eastern Europe were used not only by criminals from our part of the world, but for instance by criminal groups from India, or criminal groups from Vietnam, or criminal groups from Mexico. So basically what you had was this turnkey kind of money laundering system that was put together by really smart people, because lots of these people who are able to create this financial infrastructure globally, they are really, really, really smart, and they have resources and such. So we saw that they put in place a system that would service lots of criminal groups from all over the world. Now, what we saw then was that this was their strength, the fact that they could easily cross borders, their money could easily cross borders. But we also realized that this was their weakness, because when we investigate, big crime cases, what we do is we analyze, country by country the case. So let's say one of the investigations we did, and we'll show you a film like shortly. It's a very, very brief, short 2 minutes film. Is whenever you have a money laundering case in the billions, you'll have it developed via many, many countries. And what we do is we look at each country to see what access to information could we have in each part of the world. And in some countries, you can even access banking records via court records. So what we do is we look at the network and at its weaknesses. So the strong point of the criminals, becomes their weakness, and investigative reporters are actually able to expose large fraud. So if you could start that film, it's a 2 minutes, and that will put some meat to this discussion, I guess. So what you see right now is a country that has been captured by criminals that took over the banking system of the country and what?
When a mysterious criminal group figured out a foolproof scheme to steal millions of dollars. The way it worked was simple. It started a decade ago when a mysterious criminal group figured out a foolproof scheme to steal millions of dollars. The way it worked was simple and easily repeated. Secretive offshore paper companies would claim fake debts from state or private firms in Ukraine, Moldova, or Russia who sometimes were in on the deal. Bribed judges in the Republic of Moldova or Ukraine would accept the claims and rule in favor of the criminals. The company would pay off the debt to the offshore, and the money, protected by a court ruling, was effectively laundered and headed for Europe. Law enforcement was not sophisticated enough to figure out what was happening, or too corrupt to care. Then, in 2008, while Moldovan police were raiding a company involved in a relatively small $4 million fraud case, they found boxes full of rubber stamps, the kind used by companies to certify their official records. The mysterious stamps came from dozens of British and Delaware-based companies. The police seized them, but days later, they were ordered to return them, along with 6 computers they had confiscated. What they didn't know at the time was that they just missed an opportunity to stop what would become one of the largest money laundering operations in the world. The scheme, unabated, continued to grow more sophisticated. Eventually, with the help of British formation agents, the criminals inserted their offshore companies into the ownership structures of a number of Moldovan banks. And those fake offshore companies, whose stamps police had once had in their hands, by the spring of 2014, they had laundered $20 billion, and that's just what we know about. To keep police confused, they blatantly forged documents, changing the spelling of names each time. Finally, in the end of 2014, they pulled another big one. This mysterious criminal team made massive loans, $1 billion worth, from the banks that they controlled to fake companies. The money promptly disappeared. Even now, the great Moldovan laundering machine keeps spinning, and nobody seems to know how to stop it. And the perpetrators, some have fled, many more remain unknown. But the laundromat spins on.
So this is just one example. There are many such cases, and not only in our part of the world, in East Europe. So what we see is that banks are taken over by criminals, and we see these criminals being actually in cahoots with guys in governments in our region. So because this cannot be done without backing in the government, without having some people in the government. And I'll actually stop here, and I'll let my colleague Stefan talk about other fraud cases.
Thank you. Hello. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. So we would like to hear Stefan Dosinovic to talk about what you're doing and your experience and where you're from, and then the story that you've been working on. Thank you.
Is this no? Okay, this will work. So I'm Stefan Dosinovic from Serbia. I'm Paul's colleague, so I work together with him in Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, and also work in CRIC. It's a Serbian Center for Investigative Reporting. So, like Paul said, big part of our investigations are based on analyzing the company's record, financial data, and so on, because you can tell the stories about any crime basically through angle of this financial data. So in Serbia we investigated a lot of cases of money that was laundered through drug smuggling, because in Balkan we have really powerful groups that deal with cocaine smuggling, so they earn tens, actually hundreds of millions of euros who they launder back into the Balkans. So we did a lot of researches on these sides, but also we do a lot of investigations, financial investigation regarding our leading politicians, because there's a lot of corruption is really popular in Serbia, and bribery and so on. So there's a lot of money which basically politicians gather and which they need to launder. So what we do, we are tracking this money. And what I'm going to present to you now is like last famous case that actually we did in Serbia. It's connected to the mayor of Belgrade. So it's the first guy of our capital. And in Serbia, it's like third most powerful position in the country. So you have president, prime minister, and then the leader of capital is considered to be powerful figure. So can you just play one of... it will be like fourth, I think. Yeah. So this is the story about our mayor. It's him. He's really young, educated, liberal guy, and he runs our capital. But what actually we discovered is that he secretly bought in the Bulgaria, so the country next to Serbia, 24 luxury apartments. So if you scroll down, you can see, like, so if you click on this picture, see it's one resort on the Bulgarian coast. So he bought like one piece of it, which is kind of big, like 24 apartments that will gather together, and we estimated its value about 5 to 6 million euros in this apartment. Later on, we actually even discovered the background of story when we researched who are the owners of this apartment from who he bought. We actually found some corruption case that is related to him back then, like 10 years before the purchase of apartments. But so just to tell you how basically we discovered the story, and then I'll give you a couple more details, is that what we do, we didn't have any special source for this story. So this story was really big in Serbia, and it was a huge discovery, but it's not the story that some source approached to us or giving us info. We came to this story thanks to the fishing techniques. It's like we completely randomly research politicians in our country. That's what we do, and it's kind of really good practice, because if you look at the big part of the corruption and the money that is invested, corrupted money, will not end in your country, right? So this politician usually will buy their luxury properties in other countries. It's one part of the process of like hiding these things. And if you look, there's like a lot of really, today's you can find a lot of really good and useful actually databases around the world when you can track down this property. So I guess Paul can later present. There is even one website. It's called Investigative Dashboard, which is part of the OSRP network, who is some kind of collection of world's companies' databases. So what we do, we basically take one politician by one, and we research them through every single country where it's possible to look into their business registry. So that's what we do with our politicians. And this was like Bulgaria, which is country next to Serbia, but it was one of the last on the list to actually research. We were first looking for some much more exclusive destination. In the end, in Bulgaria, we managed to find his name in business record. We found that he was director of 2 companies in Bulgaria. And then that was not big discoveries. It was just companies with not big capital. It looked like shell companies, but then when we asked colleagues in Bulgaria to help us, they found out that these companies actually, in land registry, they found these companies own these 24 apartments. And that's basically, by accident, we reconstruct this really, really big story. In the moment we published the story, he was already in the process selling this apartment. So it was a typical money laundering operation. He bought it, and then he was like selling it one by one, but we published the story, and now they got stuck with this apartment because in his defense, publicly he claims that basically he's not owner of this and that his signatures on the documents are forged, and now we are, as journalists, proving that they are not forged. Okay, I don't know, like, do I have... Yeah, okay, so...
Thank you, Stefan. And I would like to hear again from Shantanu about his amazing story on diamond and cricket, and how the challenges that he was facing, and how he dealt with all those challenges, and how he managed to get the story written and published. Yeah.
Thank you, Bopha. I think the diamond story of all was the most fascinating of all. I think you all have seen the movie Blood Diamonds. So that story signifies just a tiny part of Africa, not the whole of Africa, which still produces about 68% of the world diamond trade. But what is interesting is, increasingly, the way Indians and Chinese diamond companies are penetrating Africa, the way they are actually taking over the mines, with the help of even the Russians, there is a peculiar nexus I found during my visits to Africa. I even went to places like Angola, Zimbabwe. I went to Antwerp, which is virtually taken over by Indians now. Now, what is happening is the certification that is coming in, the KP certification, the Kimberley process certification, that's genuine, but the source of the diamond still remains very, very unclear. No one knows from where that has come. And they're all claiming to be a clean diamond, but about almost 15% of it is still a little tainted diamond. That's number one. Number two, what is increasingly now happening in the Indian diamond market is an infiltration of what you call plastic diamonds, which are factory-made diamonds, which are pushed into the normal diamond trade. One of India's biggest swindlers, the Winsome Jewelry guys, who's now currently in hiding in Singapore, he was responsible for this, and he's one of India's biggest defaulters listed by the government. So these were interesting stuff. And another point I wish to talk about diamond is Indians who are into this trade, they do it very brazenly. They are not really worried about what happens when people get caught and what happens. They have very, very top connections with government, police, and it routinely happens in India. The preliminary level of investigation always turns out to be the weakest, and that is a problem. Eventually what happens, what journalists see as a great piece of news, when it eventually trickles down to the courts, it actually dies down and the judge throws the cases out of the window. It's the same thing I saw when I was investigating the kidney story. Now that's again a fascinating story, how one man in India built his empire, $1 million empire, by what he used to call harvesting kidneys. Now, I mean, harvesting kidneys is a very, very strange term, but Rajkumar, which is an Indian name, which actually in English means a prince, he used to watch Hollywood movies. He would travel all around the world in luxury planes and all kind of stuff he would do. And he had a great office in India that would keep tracking people who are ready to sell kidneys at an abysmally low rate. I mean, I would buy a kidney for almost as low as $1,000, and I would eventually sell that to somebody from the West or from the Far East for about $50,000. Now, again, in this case, Bopha, I mean, it will be very interesting, for me to tell you this, that all this openly happened with some of the finest hospitals that are run all over the country in India. Now, that's, I find very bizarre, because if I'm setting up a huge hospital, if my hospital is of highest standards and I charge heavily my patients because I'm offering them great doctors, great medicine, great stay, great treatment, I would actually try and check from where those kidneys are coming. But my investigation shows, and it showed actually, that none of the hospitals even argued from where it was coming.
Yeah, that's interesting, but how did you know that? I mean, what kind of technique that you used in order to find out that all these hospitals are not responsible for the kidney they're buying?
Thank you. See, I'm from the old school of journalism. This data reporting and Excel sheet doesn't really work for me. I worked with the cops first. When the first arrest was made, I went to the local police station and tried and asked them that what exactly is the story. That was just the tip of the iceberg. And from there, I slowly started gathering the first information report the police had filed. And they had meticulously collected a lot of data of how this man has harvested kidneys. From there, it went down to Calcutta in the eastern parts of the country and other parts of the country. And I could make out how big his network was. And from that network, I could easily imagine how easily he was doing it. There were two parts of it. Either he would drug somebody take them to a doctor and get the kidney out.
I mean, how did you know that? You try yourself as a patient, or
no? I think those days are over, where you can always go and try as a patient and try and do that. People have become smart. Even all corporate offices in India, they have gadgets. If you walk in with a Sting camera, it keeps beeping. So that day is over. What you have to do is actually tell a friendly cop and try and ask him that get me a person who could possibly lead me to some doctor who routinely buy kidneys. So in a casual conversation, maybe over a glass of beer or something, and you keep talking to the doctor and say, how does this happen? So I had my brother's brother-in-law, who is a doctor, and he said, we do it, but I'm not really worried about the source. All I need is a healthy kidney. As long as I get it, it doesn't matter from where it has come. It can come from Nicaragua also. But as long as I get it, I go and put it in. So the patient pays the charge, and I pay that guy whatever rates he asks, and we make a profit out of that. So that is the way the chain works, and that's the way I also work. I actually worked more with the cops. And as yesterday Paranja was saying, not all bureaucrats in India are corrupt, not all cops in India are corrupt. So somewhere there are some honest cops who will actually lead you to some stories like these.
So there are some clean, good police officer that will help you out with the story. Yeah. So don't be hopeless. So we would like to hear from Poradu on how he did the investigations on. Actually, I read one of his amazing story on how he exposed the corruption between the cross-border corruptions that kind of exposed $20 billion, right? So I would like to hear from that, how you did the story.
Yeah, thanks. So I think, in our part of the world, as in most countries actually, the cops are corrupt. So we don't really rely on law enforcement when we do our investigative work.
The same here in my country also, but maybe one person I rely on.
So what we do is we try to start our investigative work a bit differently. Because we believe in not being dependent on sources. We believe that's like a good way to do journalism. And what my colleague Stefan was mentioning, this phishing in databases, this proves to be very efficient for us. So what we basically do at the country level is we take the names of all the officials, all the people of interest, businessmen, politicians, everybody, and we run them multiple times, through databases. And, you're searching for 600 names, all the MPs in a country, and you'll run across 10 that, own companies somewhere in the Caymans, for instance, And then that's a very, very good start for the investigative work. Now, what we've seen, when you work like this, one important thing is that these guys will not know what hit them. Because their mindset, lots of these businessmen, these criminal businessmen, politicians and all, they believe that there's always a conspiracy against them, that there's someone stronger who's attacking them. So they can't see that it's just simple journalists, browsing through lots of databases. And for this, we use what Stefan was mentioning, the investigative dashboard, which is a tool that we developed at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project to do exactly this, to monitor, the activities, the businesses of politicians, of crooks. And I'll actually have a workshop on this, on how to use the tool at 3:45. But so what we do is, once we expose them, and we meet them, of course, they always believe, that there's someone stronger behind us. They really don't know and don't trust the fact that, all their activities are exposed somewhere in a database. Lots of these databases are even public. But the strength is to go across many, many frontiers. Because what's not available in a country might be available in a second country. I'll give you just one example. So in this big fraud case, that Bopha was mentioning, the 20 billion worth of money laundering, what we did was, there were lots of companies and banks from Russia involved, lots of companies and banks from Moldova, and also companies and banks from Latvia, and then from all over the world, including from Asian countries. So, it was kind of hard to get information out of Russia, but in Moldova, we managed to even get banking records that were subpoenaed by the Moldovan police from Latvia. And this is where things get really interesting when you're investigating financial fraud. We do things very differently than the cops do. So the cops are always focused on a case. So how this case started was a Romanian businessman was scammed, was stolen, with $500,000 by someone who used an offshore company. Now, he went to the police, and he said, "Oh, I got stolen, this money was stolen from me, so you got to start this investigation, this penal case." The police started the penal case, and they were only focused on that $500,000 case. But they subpoenaed, the banking records of this offshore company from a bank in Latvia, 2 years worth of banking. Now, it happened that the same company was used by the Sinaloa drug cartel to launder the money. So by having access to the court case that was filed in Moldova, we had access to the deals, that were made by Vietnamese organized crime, using this company, by Mexicans, by all this. So the police were just focused on that transaction, but we were focused on the whole file, which were like thousands and thousands of such transactions. What's also really interesting when you expose, criminals like this is that you really hurt them. We always hear complaints from journalists, investigative reporters from everywhere in the world, that, I wrote this great investigative article, and nothing happened. Well, if you do things right, if you expose them with all their infrastructure, with their companies, with their names, with everything, life gets really, really hard for them, for the criminals, because they're not able to access any more legit funds. We very often get letters, from lawyers of such criminals that tell us, "Hey, you costed me lots of money because I wanted to get this loan from this bank, and the bank didn't give me the loan, and they cited your article, or your database." So this is a really interesting way to hurt criminals, so investigating and going after their money, actually.
Works. Thank you. So could we hear from Stefan on how you did your amazing piece, investigative amazing piece?
So, like I explained, we came to the story about these apartments of Mayor through phishing. So it was completely randomly. He was on the list of, I think we had 20 officials from Serbia, for which we believed that they could be corrupted. And then we were going country by country and researching through databases of each country to find something, So for instance, if you go and check business register in Czech Republic, you'll see it's completely user-friendly and it's completely transparent. So you can go into business register of Czech Republic and type name and surname, and it will show up if this person have any kind of companies or property there. So some countries are really open. So basically we were searching through randomly to country by country, and there we found him, right? He was not the only person from this list that we basically found. This was the greatest discovery in terms of amount of the property we found. We also, for our other officials, we found also a couple of apartments and companies they own, but it was really huge amount. And after that was easier. We knew what to do. We always rely on international cooperation. That's extremely important, that journalists cooperate internationally. Without it, this thing will not work. So of course, it was possible that we go to Bulgaria and pick all the records there and so on, but if you start working with the team, with local Bulgarian journalists, for sure they will get you much more than you really can get. So we contact our colleagues from a web portal, it's called Bivol, Bulgarian investigative portal, and they gather all documents regarding the companies and these apartments. So that's how we basically built the first part of the story. But the second part of the story was actually to figure out more about background of this transaction that we discover. On one part, the money came to Bulgaria through offshore companies. So it was offshore companies in British Virgin Islands. And we found that mayor he owned power of attorney to these offshore companies. And in that moment, it was not possible much to discover more about these companies, because structure was really hard to investigate. And in this offshore zone, you cannot get documents that will show you who is basically behind it. in that moment, there was no such thing like Panama Papers and later on didn't help us much to learn about who's behind it. But then what we could do in this case was to look who was the owner of this apartment before the money came from offshore zone and before the mayor basically bought them. And that actually gave us really good discovery, because we found it was the guy who owned this apartment and from who the mayor bought it was director of famous Russian oil company Lukoil, for Lukoil, doing businesses around the world. Shortly, I'll finish. So it was director of this company, and then when we search back, we figure out that this guy was one who negotiated in Serbia 10 years before this happened with apartments in front of the Lukoil, because Lukoil was privatizing one biggest chain of gas station in Serbia they want to buy. And what actually, the whole puzzle get together when we figure out that the mayor who bought the apartment was 10 years earlier working in privatization agency. And he was leading the department for selling the companies, And actually, we even found the documents signed on one side by this director of Lukoil and another side by the mayor. So he was 10 years earlier in this deal. And then when we researched this deal, we see that this privatization was corrupted in a way that, it was not, you have procedures which you need to follow when you privatize companies. And the state was damaged for some big amount of money by this Russian company. And then later on, 10 years later, we actually found this purchase. So we figure out that most likely this apartment were kind of corruption or actually payback to mayor thanks to the service he provided to this Russian company. And that's how we basically managed to make all puzzle together, not even in the end discovering for the background on offshore company, because this is the last sentence here. It's like sometimes journalists putting too much pressure to destroy the wall that there is when you're establishing offshore companies. In many cases, you will not be able to discover who really owner is behind it. But if you, like we did, gather a lot of other information around it, you can actually tell the same story. Sorry for...
Yeah, so you mentioned about the document. I'm just wondering, how did you manage to get the people to give you document? And you also mentioned the database, that you get the document. Once you got the document, and then you search the names through the database. What kind of database is that, and can I find it somewhere?
To learn more about these databases, I think it's best if you all go to Paul's workshop later. He will really go through through all these databases and summarize you how to get it. But it's actually it's not simple thing. It's just you need to know where you can find these things. Other documents, all documents we collected in this story are public documents. So it was not problem in gathering them. It was business records, land records, and it was the documents that we gathered from Serbian privatization agency. It was all public. The whole thing was actually to know what to look. But it's not hard to get the document. That was the simplest part.
Paul, would you like to...
Take this, Jesus.
So would you like to explain us a little bit about how that database, like where can I find that database? And also, I'm wondering how did you manage to get the people involved with journalists that help you out with this kind of story? For example, because the story is kind of complicated. It involves a bunch of countries like Latvia, Russia, and Ukraine, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So as Stefan mentioned, I'll have a workshop on the Investigative dashboard. That's the website that he's putting up right now. So you could actually use lots of databases, but what's more important, as Stefan said, is having contacts, working with reporters in many countries. So when we investigated this massive money laundering operation, in Eastern Europe, we needed help, for instance, from Seoul, from South Korea. And we worked with a reporter from Newstapa, which is a great investigative reporting outlet in South Korea. And we needed help, for instance, in Vietnam, but we couldn't find investigative reporters, to work with in Vietnam, and I'm hoping that here, we'll find a few reporters that we can work with. But again, just 2 points to make here is, as we talk about tools to expose criminals, criminals organize workshops teaching each other how to hide their assets and their money and all this. So what we're having here, we can have in reverse as well, my colleagues at the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project and myself attended some of these workshops that were organized by criminals that would actually help you, hide your traces. It's also, one of our latest stories, it was published about 3 months ago, exposed the fact that some of the crooked banks, some of the banks involved in these money laundering operations, actually published fraud manuals. So the users of these banks would get this manual on how to properly do the fraud. So there would be instructions there such as, okay, if you need to launder $1 billion US, don't put 1 billion in the financial records. Put 999 million, always use crooked numbers. Don't put 1 million, put 800,000, and all this. If you don't live near a port, don't say that you shipped these goods from a port to this other place, So all these instructions, pretty simple instructions actually, were in there in these fraud manuals. So when investigating financial fraud, it's really, really important to try to talk as much as possible with criminals. Some of them are jailed, so it's not that hard to find them, and to ask them how did they do the fraud, how did they go about it, That's really, really important in order to learn how to investigate financial fraud.
So basically, you just spend some time to go visit some criminals in jail. When I was working at the Daily, I did that too. And we should do that more. Visit some criminal in jail so we get the story idea. Because one day in jail, they sometimes they have dispute with their partners. So they just want to destroy their partner. So that is a good chance for us journalists to get the story idea. So we have, I think, the session is we're running out of time. We have about 15 minutes. So we open to the video on this case. Okay, and after that we open for the Q&A. Okay. Thank you.
So this is just play. We made 4-minute video on this case, which I showed. So.
This is Siniša Mali, the powerful mayor of the Serbian capital of Belgrade and a close friend of the Prime Minister. In a country recovering from years of war and corrupt management, Mali prides himself on being a modern, progressive leader, someone different. He was even educated in the United States, receiving a master's degree from an elite university. But our reporters discovered a seemingly unknown side of Mali. They found documents that say that Mali is the director of offshore companies that secretly bought 24 luxury apartments on the Bulgarian Black Sea coast. The resort's website touts 6 pools, 2 pool bars, cafe, piano bar, spa center, fitness center, eco-parks, and 24-hour security with video surveillance. The apartments were purchased through companies in the British Virgin Islands, and offshore notorious for tax evasion, money laundering, and hiding the true beneficiaries of companies and assets. The apartments are valued at approximately $6.1 million. Given that Mali has never earned more than $39,000 in a year, his alleged ownership of the properties is baffling. The investigation has put a new level of scrutiny on Mali. He vehemently denies that he is the director of the offshore companies and says someone forged his signature.
Jer je slovo I na kraju apsolutno identično. Apsolutni falsifikat.
However, our reporters obtained a signature of Mali's from 2014, which bears many similarities to the one he claims was forged. Dragana Pecho is one of the journalists working on the story.
He can find proofs to say that his signature is forged, or others graphologists could say that they change a little bit their signatures in purpose. So one day they can say that it's not their signature or that it's forged.
Our reporters approached the mayor in person a few days after the revelation. journalists were accosted by municipal police who confiscated their cameras and tried to erase any footage of the encounter. Mali appeared in a video to make light of the accusations against him and mock the people who have criticized him on Twitter.
Bolje 24 stana u Bugarskoj na moru nego jedan u Beogradu na vodi. Ne slažem se. Jedan u Beogradu na vodi vredi više nego svi stanovi u Bugarskoj.
Mali says a Bulgarian graphologist he hired confirmed that his signature was forged. The simple question still remains as to why anyone would forge Mali's signature.
That's what our people from Serbia asking these days. Why somebody didn't forge my signature and bought me 5 million euros worth apartments and so on.
If the allegations concerning Mali's Bulgarian apartments are true, then how did he obtain the apartments? A good place to look is Mali's earlier career, when he was an official at the Serbian State Agency for Privatization. A unique pattern of doing business developed. In 2003, Lukoil, the Russian oil giant, made a bid to privatize a Serbian state gas company called Beopetrol. A man named Srđan Dabić represented Lukoil's interest in the deal. Under the supervision of Mali's department, Lukoil successfully completed the deal for $134 million. However, a Serbian anti-corruption council called the deal crooked. It said Lukoil, instead of investing in Beopetrol as promised, actually borrowed money from the Serbian company, almost equal to the amount it spent. Back to those luxury apartments, after the sale was completed, Dabić, Mali's counterpart in the deal, sold or transferred control of the luxury apartments to the companies of which Mali is listed as the director. And that's not all. Our reporters found other troubling examples where Mali used his tenure at the privatization agency to enrich himself. And almost a decade later, Siniša Mali would become one of the most powerful politicians in the country, not so much a laughing matter for the people of Serbia.
Thank you. Q&A, be open to the questions.
Okay, I have two questions. Actually, I have three, but I'll keep it to two, both for Paul. If you can just talk a little that, about the investigations that you do. When you're going through databases, when you're digging up these crimes, do you also focus a lot on when you're reporting and when you're writing your story or when you're putting out your information, how much, if you could talk a little on how much you focus on the laws which are being violated, okay, or something that could lead to a law being changed by the kind of crimes that you're exposing. That is one. The other thing is if you could talk a little about your internet ownership project, that would be very helpful.
Well, I believe, looking for change in laws, and it's the job of activists, not of investigative reporters. We can follow on what's going on, of course, and all that. And for instance, in this case, when we exposed the $20 billion US dollars worth of money laundering, everything was laundered through one bank in Latvia, which used to be a big bank there. As a result of our reporting, the bank was stripped of their Moody's rating, and that affected them a lot because they couldn't access, international markets afterwards. And actually, this year the bank went bankrupt. So this is change, I suppose. Now, there were changes in laws after our reporting. There were, for instance, in Moldova, politicians were discussing for a long time not allowing offshore companies, in ownership schemes, of all kinds in the country and such. But that's, politicians are very slow. Law enforcement, as I mentioned before, unfortunately, is very corrupt in our region. So, changes in law occur very, very rarely, if ever, What's more important to us, and it's also, when criminals put together their criminal infrastructure, they don't care about the laws at the level of the country because they operate across many frontiers, So what they do is they do country assessments to see what's the penalty, for instance, for doing this crime in this country, So if it's a high penalty, they probably won't do it in that country, but do it in a second country where, the punishment is less, and stuff. Now, regarding the internet ownership project, we used the same methods as we used, in this money laundering case. We tracked down companies. we track down people, because even if you're talking about internet companies, or banks, or in the end, what you're dealing with is the same thing. I mean, when you're investigating financial crime, you're investigating the same everywhere in the world, because it's probably the only common language across the globe. That's business. Business is set up the same everywhere in the world. There's going to be a company with a name, with a number, with people inside it, or other companies inside it, and all that. So in the Internet Ownership Project, which is actually it's a project that we developed in Eastern Europe, where you can actually see who's giving you the Wi-Fi. So, for instance, if this would be implemented here in this room, you could access the Wi-Fi here, and our app is telling you exactly who's behind the Wi-Fi. People. And in many cases, we found offshores, owning the internet, and there's this battle right now between the Americans and the Russians to control the internet. So lots of companies owned by very important people from West Europe, from the US, from Russia. So that's a project that we launched this year, and I think it's going quite well, actually. So thanks.
Any more questions? Questions over there.
So can you go over what exactly the full 10 crimes are? I know we talked a lot about money laundering and healthcare fraud. What are some of the other ones on the list?
Top 10 crimes. Okay, we presented you a couple of cases. We basically deal, and of course, in different regions, some other crimes are kind of more popular. I can just present you as OCRP what we do as the most general cases we will find during our investigation. Of course, will be for sure money laundering, which eventually you will find in any kind of the crime activity. So no matter, is it drug smuggling, is it corruption, is it tax evasion, in the end you will have some part of the money which you need to launder. So this is the crime you cannot ever avoid. So that's why Paul said it's extremely important to track down the money, because that can bring you to other crimes. Besides this, we do a lot of investigation in OCRP on drug smuggling. So this is one of our major things. We do a lot because since it's Eastern Europe, so it's important to know that all these countries went through this process. We were like socialist countries with state-owned property. So we went in this process of, it's called transition, into like liberal market. So a transition meant that you basically are, these companies and deals that were controlled by government, now they are going into private hands. This was really good place for a lot of stealing money from these deals. So what we do, we also investigate in this privatization frauds a lot. We also do investigation on of misuse of public money through deals that private companies made with the government, and from where they rip off a lot of money from the budget. We also had a lot of investigation on the typical corruption cases, the bribes. We do also stories on weapon smuggling. This is also kind of hot in Eastern Europe, popular crime to do. So this is basically, I think, the most important fields we look. I think in future we'll do more investigation to cybercrime. Yeah, we start doing it. It's still fresh in this, but it will be like next field also be more intensively followed.
Cyber fraud is definitely one of the top financial crimes right now. And what we're doing at OCCRP is we're creating these mixed teams where we have hackers working together with journalists. And we're tracking down, from IPs, from where, fraud was conducted, and I'm talking again about high-level money laundering, sometimes connected not only to, all sorts of money stolen from budgets, but we've investigated a lot of financial fraud when it comes to environmental crimes. So, for instance, we just released a documentary on illegal logging across Eastern Europe, and this has a very, very important financial component as well. And what's interesting, I mean, you can talk about financial fraud from many angles, and usually, is the people who suffer, but lots of times the criminals themselves are victims to financial fraud. For instance, one of the masterminds of this criminal system that laundered the 20 billion. We interviewed him in the spring, and he's now in jail. Actually, he was arrested about a month ago. So when we interviewed him, he was complaining about how other criminals, stole money from him. So that's happening quite often. He even filed a court case against one of his peers, a guy that he lent some money to, and he never saw his money back. So this is also to keep in mind when you're talking about financial fraud. Sometimes, I mean, criminals are always prone to stealing money from other criminals.
So I just want to add to him, especially when if the government working to pass on some kind of law, you have to look into the law, because most of the time they trying to pass a law because they want some kind of benefit. Especially it happened in Cambodia. So when there's some law in the process of passing, look into that, look around the issue. And the other things that in the case of financial crime that you have to look into when it comes to the land swap. Because in Cambodia, for example, the state swapped the land with the private company, and that the state would give very, very expensive land to the company, and in exchange the department, the state would move the building to somewhere far away that is very, very, the land that costs very cheap price. So that is another case that you should also look into. And it's huge scandal, really big, and it's happening quietly. Thank you. And 2 more questions.
Yeah, okay. I'm Shujoy Gupta from the Herald in Goa in India. My question is to either Paul or Steve. I was wondering, what is the kind of relationship that you have with mainstream newspapers and publications in your country? Because these are all your own initiatives. Now, in the sense that, what is the traditional media doing, or is it left completely to you? And as a follow-up to that question, do the traditional media, do they follow up on your investigations or seek your help, or is it just an isolated effort that you all do?
Okay, this is a tough question. Is this okay? So the problem, especially in Serbia, so mainstream media, we're a web portal. We have strong readership actually on internet, but still we don't have much chances to reach to the mainstream media in terms leading newspapers and TV station, because there is in Serbia censorship in a way that government completely controls all the mainstream media. Not just that, the problem we are facing now in Serbia is when we publish the story, then all the mainstream media actually attack us. So you have lot of stories that are published against us. So for instance, I was 2 months ago, I was for 4 days on the front page of the leading newspaper in Serbia with bigger circulation. So I was 4 days on the front page, presented as what? It's called Informer. You can find actually on internet. I can show you. So I was presented as associate of mafia, foreigner spy, sadomasochist, or whatever. So they put but it's actually a really big problem, because the Serbian intelligence, so our spy agency, is really active in monitoring the journalists. So they gather also a lot of things. That's why you need to be very careful in Serbia, from your private lives, who you meet, and then they publish these photos in newspaper. So I had I can read in these newspapers. I read, why did I get in fight with my girlfriend, this kind of stuff. So it's really hard to work. It's everything is transparent, literally. Another way, they use this against you through mainstream media. So you have for instance, they have more readers than us. So for one big part of the population, they can just read the damage control of our stories. So I'll just shortly, in one sentence. So in this story, for instance, for Mayor, when we publish it, of course, it's spread on other independent media. There are some independent media. Unfortunately, they are not major ones. So their defense was that all the documents we found were actually forged. Like, it's official documents from business registry, but they say his signature was forged, and this story was pushed through all, major TV channels and newspapers. So one big part of the population in Serbia, they just read this, so they just see the story that we are some group of journalists who try to forge or something against May or something. So it's a really difficult environment to...
Just to add on that, Stefan was part of this project as well. We actually we tracked down the owners of the media all over Eastern Europe, and we found a very interesting situation all across our region. I mean, lots of the media owned via offshores, and lots of the media owned by the people involved in the financial crimes, so high-level financial crimes. Yes, we published that. Yeah, there's a portal. It's on the web. You can actually find it. And one interesting thing, though, about this is that when we publish an expose about a certain businessman, that businessman will always have enemies who control a different part of the press. So that part of the press will always publish that expose on that particular businessman. When we'll expose the businessman connected to the other side, this other guy is going to publish. So we don't see this as something that is wrong, because in the end what we need is more public to read our stuff. So, but this is how our reporting is used lots of times. And besides that, of course, we publish with big media like The Guardian, like the BBC, and that's...
Yeah, more questions over there? Yeah, the gentleman over there. Over there. Yeah.
This is Rajendra from GIJN, Nepal. Could you explain something about the risk factor and the safety measures for especially the investigative journalists in Balkan areas, from the mafias and other powerful people? What type of measures you take for safety of journalists?
Actually, I think my colleague Stefan and with Drew Sullivan, they will have actually a session on this, on security and how to ensure security. So if you're interested on risk and how to actually deal with risk, I think that session is good too. But there's serious risk,
Yeah, we'll go in more details with this, so you can come to our lecture. Just to show you, this is examples, like one of the front page. So it's like we were investigating the property of Prime Minister. So when they figure out this, before we publish stories, so before they open campaign against us. So this is like front page, it's me, and it's like mafia attacks family of Vučić Prime Minister, So also Drew, my editor, is mentioned there. So the whole point is they found, this photo is me standing with my source, who is from criminal background, but so they presented like that basically he's controlling me, and he was engaged in drug smuggling and stuff. I mean, but of course, as a journalist, you have sources from other sides. And that and together with my editor, who's American, and in Serbia, Americans are usually presented as CIA agents. So the story is a crazy story that basically mafia and CIA together gather to give me information about property of Prime Minister, and we want to, take down Prime Minister. Like completely crazy story. But the problem is this is the newspaper with biggest circulation in Serbia, So they present me in this way before the story was published. And then no matter what you find, when you publish story, they will say, we aware nation, in advance that this thing will come up. And then they basically, your discovery spin as attack on Prime Minister and pushing this as a topic and not really what you discover. So when you don't have free media, it's really hard to fight till the end.
More questions? One more.
Hello. Since your investigation often happens in different countries, so I wonder how you make local connections, and is there any tips you can share with us?
Trick.
What kind of local connections do you talk about? In various countries. I think it all depends on investigation to investigation. Let's see, if I'm investigating diamonds, I'll definitely be in touch with my counterparts in China. I will speak to people in Africa. I'll speak to people in Dubai. And that is the route I'll try and take. I never had great success in Russia, but that's the route I'll normally take. I'll seek information from my sources. I'll try and get that. In case of a kidney story, if I'm chasing, I'll definitely seek out sources in Nepal, which is a great supplier of all these dubious traders who trade in kidneys. I'll look into Bangladesh. I'll look into Sri Lanka. Definitely I'll look into that. So you always depend on sources like that. But if there's one investigation which is completely India-centric, you really don't have to look into your international sources and try and figure out what kind of sources you need. Let's say if I'm investigating a land scam in India, you really, either you can bolster your copy by putting certain examples of similar cases across the country, but I don't think that adds too much of value. You actually focus on the land, as Bopha was saying. We have similar cases in India how prime land is offered to big corporations at peanut value, and that's where basically the story lies. You really, for a local copy, you look for local sources, but a copy which has international ramifications on international trade, you will actually have to speak to international sources.
Yeah, so actually this is a great chance to really get to know each other, exchange your name cards, and get to know local journalists because they know what's going on with their countries very well. And before you start, yeah, sure, okay.
One great place to find, connections in other countries is obviously the global investigative journalism listserv. So if you're not part of that, and I hope you are, that's a great place where you can just ask, I need someone in Romania or I need someone in Serbia to work with, and then you find the right reporter there and work.
And they do this cross-border. Like I worked on tobacco, I worked on asbestos twice with the Global Investigative Journalist Network. So they ask you to do the India part of the story, and then they add up to the global part of the story.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think there are some places that you can pitch the story to. For example, IJAsia, if you have like global story idea, you can pitch to the editors, and then you can ask if you could work on this project with other journalists abroad. Or if you plan to work on like a cross-border reporting, then I guess you will have to, you have to kind of do research on some kind of stories that with the byline, so you can search the byline and then you can find out who's the great reporter in that country and who you can contact for the story. Any more questions? Okay. Thank you for coming. Thank you so much.